My father, Richard, a man who built his entire personality on exaggerated stories of his peacetime service, was holding his phone. From what I was told later, his face went completely pale, a stark contrast to the cheerful noise of the backyard party surrounding him. A voice, crisp with an authority he hadn't heard in 30 years, cut right through the speaker for everyone to hear. "Mr. Rostova, let me be crystal clear. Your daughter isn't some homesick private. Captain Eva Rostova is the lead human analyst for Task Force Neptune. Her post-mission debrief is a matter of national security." The voice didn't pause for effect. "Right now she is classified as unaccounted for, non-responsive. I suggest you locate my captain before I'm forced to escalate this to a formal command inquiry. But for that call to shatter his perfect world, you have to go back 8 hours." The engines of the C-17 medical transport were still roaring in my ears as I stepped onto the tarmac at Andrews Air Force Base. I was decorated, exhausted, and fundamentally changed. The sleeve of my uniform where my left arm used to be was pinned neatly, a constant, sharp reminder of the cost. I stood there on American soil and made the call I had been dreading my entire flight home. First, I called my brother, Mark, the family's golden child, who believed a person's value was written on their bank statement. He was dismissive, his voice hurried. "Eva, hey. Look, I'm in the middle of a huge deal. Can't you just get a cab? I'll Venmo you." The line went dead. Just like that. I wasn't his sister, who had just come home from a war. I was just an inconvenient expense to be settled. Next, I called my parents, Richard and Carol, a pair who worshipped at the altar of public perception. Their response was somehow even worse, a cheerful blade in the gut. "Sweetheart, we're so glad you're back, but we're in the middle of setting up for our annual summer gala. All our friends are coming. It would be impossible to leave now. The caterer is here." The caterer was here. That was the reason. A familiar coldness settled deep in my bones, the tired weight of a truth I'd spent my whole life trying to deny. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone, a lone soldier abandoned on an empty runway. I opened the group chat and typed a single word: "Fine." They thought they were just brushing off their broken daughter. They had no idea they had just broken chain of custody for a national security asset. To understand the reckoning that was now barreling towards their perfect little party, you have to understand the two lives I was living. To understand my family, you have to understand the stories they told themselves. And the story they loved most was the one about my brother, the success. It was a narrative polished to a high shine at every family gathering, never more so than at a Christmas dinner 2 years before my injury. The entire evening was an altar built to my brother Mark's latest achievement, a 6-figure bonus. My father, Richard, stood to give a toast, his voice booming with a pride he never showed me. He raised his glass of expensive champagne, the crystal ringing as he beamed at my brother. "To my son, the shark, a real killer out there in the market," he bellowed, and the family applauded, their faces glowing with adoration. Later, when there was a brief lull in the worship, I tried to share a piece of my own life. I spoke quietly, almost hesitantly. "I was actually awarded a Bronze Star a few weeks ago," I said, the words feeling small and insignificant in the room. My father, still basking in Mark's reflected glory, simply patted my hand without making eye contact. "That's nice, dear, but try to stay safe behind that desk, you hear? No need for any of that heroics stuff." He then turned to my uncle and chuckled. "Our little Sarge, always busy with her paperwork." Sarge? It was their condescending nickname for me, a way to diminish my role and my actual rank as a captain. In that moment, the Bronze Star felt like a cheap piece of tin. It wasn't just this one dismissal. It was the science fair trophy he called, a trinket, the academic scholarship he'd dismissed as book money. It was a lifetime of my achievements being measured against Mark's and always coming up short. That was the world they lived in. A world of bonuses and condescending nicknames, of tangible successes they could brag about to their friends. My world was different. It was quieter, colder, and infinitely more real. There were no champagne toasts, only the low, constant hum of servers in a secure, sound-proofed debriefing room in Bagram. a place so secret it officially didn't exist. The air was always chilled to protect the electronics, and the silence was heavy with unspoken consequences. In that world, my name wasn't Sarge or Dear. It was Oracle. And there, I didn't have to fight to be heard. In that room, I reported directly to my commanding officer, General Matthews, a grizzled, two-star general who didn't care about family stories, only about actionable intelligence. He was a man with the weight of an entire theater of war on his shoulders, but when I spoke, he listened with an intensity that was both terrifying and validating. I remember one briefing vividly, the fate of an entire diplomatic convoy hanging in the balance. I looked at the data streams, at the fragments of intercepted chatter, and I saw a pattern no one else did. "General," I said, my voice steady, "the chatter is a ghost. They're using a layered deception. The real threat isn't the IED convoy. It's the insider threat at the provincial governor's compound." I pointed to a specific node on the holographic map. "Cross-reference the biometric data from Checkpoint Zulu. I'm flagging the asset as compromised." I took a breath, the weight of my next words settling on me. "I recommend we initiate Protocol Chimera immediately." Protocol Chimera was a last resort contingency, a high-risk operation to neutralize a confirmed threat in a friendly compound. It was a call that could end careers, or lives, if it was wrong. General Matthews stared at the board, his jaw tight. He didn't question me. He didn't pat my hand or call me a nickname. He just gave a short, sharp nod to his aide. "Do it," he said. The lives of dozens of people, diplomats and soldiers alike, were resting on my analysis. That was my reality. A world of life and death decisions, made in silence and acknowledged with a simple, trusting nod. I once tried to explain the gravity of my work to my mother, Carol, a woman who believed family peace was a fragile thing that must never be disturbed by uncomfortable truths. We were in the kitchen during one of my leaves, and I attempted to describe the responsibility I felt. She just stirred her tea, her expression placid. "Your father is just from a different generation, Eva," she'd said softly, as if that explained everything. "He doesn't understand all this computer stuff you do. Mark's job is so much more tangible, you know? He needs our encouragement." The implication was clear. My work was intangible, confusing, and therefore less important. My brother's pursuit of money was real. My pursuit of protecting lives was a hobby. I realized then that my mother's job wasn't to understand me, but to manage my expectations, to gently, lovingly, and persistently push me back into the small box they had built for me. For years I'd tried to win their approval. Lying on that sterile bed at Walter Reed, ignored and alone, I realized I didn't need their approval. I just needed to follow my protocol, and the protocol for an abandoned asset was about to turn their world upside down. Back at Andrews, sitting on the cold metal bench of a transport bus, shelter, the initial searing sting of betrayal began to recede. It was replaced by something else entirely, the quiet, cold logic of my training. My mind began to compartmentalize, to analyze the situation not as a daughter who had been abandoned, but as an officer facing a logistical failure. My mission was simple, successful reintegration from a combat zone. The primary support element, my next of kin, had failed to execute their assigned duty. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a breakdown in protocol, and protocol had its own solutions. I decided then and there I wouldn't fight them on their terms with tears or angry voicemails. I would use the rules of my world. I pulled up my official transfer paperwork on my tablet. The document was sterile, filled with codes and regulations, but one section glowed with significance: next of kin escort. There it was in black and white. Richard Rostova. His signature, a confident, arrogant swirl of ink, was on the digital line. He had accepted the responsibility. I then cross-referenced the transport regulation, AR 608-10. The procedure was clear. Failure of an assigned NOC escort to appear triggers a specific escalating notification sequence. Calling a cab was my family's solution, a quick, transactional way to make the problem disappear. But I wasn't their problem to solve anymore. I made a different call. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Base Liaison, Master Sergeant Cole." I kept my own voice even, professional, and devoid of emotion. "Master Sergeant, this is Captain Rostova. My designated knock escort is non-responsive and has failed to appear." I chose my next words with surgical precision. "Per regulations, I'm requesting temporary lodging on base until my command can arrange for secure transport. For OPSEC, I'm shutting down my personal comms. Please update my status in the system to awaiting command-directed travel." Every phrase was a keyword, a trigger. Knock non-responsive started a welfare check. OPSEC added a layer of seriousness. Awaiting command-directed travel officially handed my situation from my family to the U.S. Army. After the call, I looked at my personal cell phone one last time. It represented their world, a world of excuses, dismissals, and party planners. With a slow, deliberate slide of my thumb, I powered it off. The screen went dark, and with it, my connection to their noise. I was now officially in the system. My family hit ignore on their phones, thinking I was just an inconvenience. They didn't realize they had just ignored a formal summons from the United States Army. The system was now hunting for me, and it was heading directly for their front door. While I was settling into a sterile, anonymous room in the base's temporary lodging, the scene at my family's home was the exact opposite. Their annual summer gala, the event deemed more important than my return, was in full swing. I can picture it perfectly. The manicured lawn under a blanket of fairy lights, the soft clinking of wine glasses, the murmur of polite conversation. At the center of it all would be my father, Richard, holding court by the grill, telling a slightly embellished story about his time in the National Guard to a rapt audience of neighbors. Nearby, my brother Mark would be laughing loudly, bragging to his colleagues about a market win, the undisputed prince of this perfect suburban kingdom. They were the stars of their own show, completely cocooned in a world of their own making. The first crack in that perfect facade was a phone call. I learned later it was a blocked number, buzzing insistently in Mark's pocket. Annoyed at the interruption, he pulled it out and answered with a sharp, "Yeah?" It was the base liaison office, the first step in the protocol I had initiated. The voice on the other end was professional, asking for my whereabouts. Mark, ever the master of efficiency, cut them off. "Yeah, she's fine. On her way. Bye." He hung up, rolled his eyes at a friend as if to say, "Can you believe the drama?" and went right back to his story. He had no idea he'd just dismissed a formal inquiry from the United States Army. 10 minutes later, my mother's phone rang. This time the voice was sharper, the purpose clearer. "Ma'am, we need to verify Captain Rostova's location. This is a formal welfare check." My mother, Carol, gave a delicate, theatrical sigh. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she whispered to the woman next to her. "Eva can be so dramatic." She saw the call not as a serious inquiry, but as a childish bid for attention. She silenced her phone, placing it face down on the table, a physical act of denial. She was literally silencing the truth, refusing to let it interrupt her carefully curated evening. In her mind, the party was reality, and the call was just a nuisance. Then came the final escalation. My father's phone rang, and this time, the caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. area code. He answered with the smug confidence of a man who believes he is the most important person in any room. "You've reached Richard." But the voice that answered was not an admirer or a business associate. It was steel. "Mr. Rostova, this is Colonel Miller, General Matthews' Chief of Staff. Do you know the current location of your daughter?" My father began to bluster, launching into some excuse about the party. He was used to being in charge, to his voice being the one that commanded respect. He was not prepared for what came next. The colonel cut him off mid-sentence, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Sir, you were a soldier. You understand the gravity of this." There was a brief pause, and then the words that changed everything. "I'm patching in the general." Suddenly, the cheerful party noise died. The speakerphone broadcast General Matthews' voice across the silent lawn, every word a hammer blow against my family's world. He repeated the words I had heard in my flash forward, but now they were real, echoing in the stunned silence. He stated my rank, my title as lead human analyst, my task force. He detailed my status as unaccounted for. Then he delivered the final, devastating charge, the one aimed directly at my father's pride. "This is being logged as a dereliction of knock duty." dereliction. For a man who built his identity on a fantasy of military honor, that one word was a public execution. I can see the faces of their friends and neighbors, expressions shifting, from polite admiration to shock, then to pity and judgment. All those years they had heard the stories of the golden son and the vaguely disappointing daughter. Now, in the harsh light of truth, they were seeing the reality. They were seeing a father who had abandoned his wounded in-action daughter for a tray of hors d'oeuvres. All the bluster drained from my father's face. The ruddy, confident man, who had been telling war stories moments before, was gone, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed stranger. And then something incredible happened. As the general's voice continued to echo from the phone, my father's posture changed. His shoulders went back. His back straightened. It was an involuntary reflexive snap to a position of attention, the ingrained posture of a junior soldier being dressed down by a commanding general. He was no longer the king of the party. He was just a civilian who had failed an officer. He was a man who was finally, for the very first time, seeing his daughter for her rank. My father had spent my entire life dismissing my rank. In the end, it was a 2-star general on a speakerphone who finally made him stand at attention for his daughter. The party didn't so much end as it dissolved into a cloud of humiliation. I was told later that after the general's call, the string lights and cheerful music felt like a mockery. My family's phones, which had been silenced to ignore my pleas, now rang incessantly with calls they were forced to answer. One after another, colonels, sergeants major, and base commanders called, each conversation a fresh wave of shame as my parents and brother had to explain in halting broken sentences that they had abandoned their wounded daughter for a social gathering. They were trapped in a nightmare of their own making, forced to confront their failure in the language they respected most, the language of rank and authority. While their world was imploding, mine was quietly being put back in order. A short while later, a discreet, professional-looking sedan pulled up to my on-base lodging. An officer, a young captain like myself, stepped out and approached me. He didn't offer pity or ask invasive questions. He simply stopped, rendered a crisp salute, and said, "Captain Rostova, we're your transport." In that single simple gesture of respect, I felt more seen and valued than I had in a lifetime of trying to earn my family's approval. I returned the salute, got in the car without a backward glance, and let the system I trusted carry me forward. That night marked the end of a chapter. 18 months later, a new one was well underway. My new reality was the Pentagon, a world away from my family's suburban drama. After my recovery and debrief, I was promoted to major and offered a position I'd only dreamed of, as a senior strategist with DARPA, the agency responsible for creating the future of military technology. I now spend my days working with brilliant minds, designing next-generation intelligence systems to protect soldiers. My new arm, a cutting-edge prosthetic, is a constant reminder that what is broken can be rebuilt, often stronger than before. Here, no one calls me Sarge. They call me Major Rostova, and when I speak, entire rooms of high-ranking officials fall silent to listen. My colleagues and superiors have become my real family, a unit forged in mutual respect and a shared sense of duty. General Matthews, now a mentor, put it best during one of our weekly coffee meetings. He looked at me over his cup, his expression serious but kind. "Your family may not have understood your sacrifice, Major," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But your country does. Your work has saved lives. That's a legacy they can't comprehend." His words settled something deep within me. He was right. A legacy wasn't a story you told at parties, it was something you built in silence through service. I had finally found a place where my legacy was understood. A few weeks ago, an email appeared in my inbox. It was from my father. The subject line was just one word: Eva. The message was short, the tone humbled and unfamiliar. It was a rambling, awkward apology, asking if I would be willing to talk sometime. 2 years ago, that email would have been everything I ever wanted. I read it through once, my expression calm, my heartbeat steady. I felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, just a quiet, detached peace. I didn't delete it. Deleting it would have been an emotional act. Instead, I simply moved the message to a new folder I created, a folder I titled Non-Priority. My peace was no longer dependent on their validation. I archived their message and turned back to the complex schematic on my screen. My work was waiting. My family thought a hero was someone you threw a party for. I learned a hero is someone you show up for when the world is quiet and they're all alone. Your real unit isn't defined by blood, but by who's waiting for you on the tarmac. If you've ever had to find your own squad in life, share your story below. In this community, we never leave a soldier behind.